Hello cruel world, my name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. So today's video is going to be a bit different from usual. It's going to be more opinionated and less educational because we need to talk about Harry. So I'm going to give you my opinion on Harry and Meghan stepping back from the royal family. Specifically, I'm going to talk about their privilege and their supposed financial independence. And I'm also going to speak about my thoughts about Harry coming out about his mental health issues. He's made a series recently with the help of Oprah. As a psychiatrist, I'm all about talking about mental health problems. I'm all about reducing stigma, so that's my kind of special interest angle on this scenario. I've tried to make this video balanced because I think there's a lot of Harry bashing that's going on and I didn't want to just jump on the bandwagon. But at the same time, I don't want to make a video that's obsequious. And if you don't know what obsequious means, get a dictionary. Now, as the whole world and their grandmother and their mothers and their great-grandmothers know, Harry and Meghan stepped away from the royal family in January of this year, 2021. It was known as Megxit, although personally I like to call it the H&M closing down sale. So the couple went on Oprah on the 7th of March this year, and they basically complained about their lives and about the way they were treated. And to be completely honest, I wasn't that interested at the time. It really didn't bother me. In fact, I kind of wanted to avoid it, but I couldn't because it was all over the news. My friends were talking about it, colleagues at work were talking about it. And then things changed a little bit because he started talking more about his mental health issues and I was kind of drawn in. I had to see what was going on. But the reason I wasn't interested was because Harry and Meghan have so much privilege. To be honest, I'm more interested in Oprah's story because she made it with nothing. She didn't have this big, rich, powerful institution behind her. So I'm not saying that Harry and Meghan don't have the right to complain about things. They do. I'm just saying that the average person, you, me, isn't necessarily going to be that interested, isn't necessarily going to sympathise with them. Harry and Meghan probably were bullied and they probably were mistreated, they probably faced some discrimination. It's not that I don't believe them, it's just that I just don't care. I mean, you show me a family that's not had its little infights and its squabbles, and I will show you a bunch of liars who happen to be related to each other. I think the problem is that I'm quite inured. So not from my own personal life, but from patients I see. So even within this last month, I've seen people in court that have come from horrific backgrounds, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I assessed a woman in prison very recently who was forced into prostitution. Although it was a while ago, a case that really sticks in my mind was a psychotic drug dealer who assaulted a random man on a bus because he had delusions of misidentification. It's quite a horrific offence, but his background was just so harsh. His own father broke his arm when he was 6 months old. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, from my experiences of what I hear about, I struggle to find sympathy for Harry and Meghan. In the words of the great philosopher Shania Twain, that don't impress me much. There were also these accusations of racism. So Harry said that an unnamed member of the royal family, and let's face it, it's got to be Prince Philip, asked about the skin tone of Archie because of Meghan's ethnicity. First of all, that's not necessarily meant in a horrible, offensive way. It could just be inquisitive. And even if we give Harry the benefit of the doubt, even if it was a hurtful comment, so what? People from ethnic minorities, including myself, have to live through abject racism and hurtful comments like that every day. Also, I read that some of their gripes were not accurate. So to be specific, one of their issues was that Archie would not be given a royal title and that their children wouldn't be afforded protection which would be paid for by the royal family. But I also read that they shouldn't have expected this because they are not automatically entitled to those things, because Harry is not the firstborn son like William is. And also the equivalent members of the royal family don't get those kind of benefits. The thing I think that irks me the most is they said that they want to step back and be financially independent. I mean, what do they mean financially independent? So I've got a question for you, dear viewers, and I will answer it later on in this video. Can you tell me how much money Harry inherited from his mother, and with an average UK salary, how long it would take the average person to earn that? Answers later on. So most of the UK, most of the world, we have to go through struggles, we have to work hard at school, we have to get qualifications, we have to go through job interviews, work long hours, we have to pay the bills. And that is a struggle that Harry will never know. In fact, 14.5 million people in the UK were living in poverty before the pandemic, and that number has increased to well over 50 million since then. And the population's only 67 million, so you do the math. And the other thing that bothers me is that Harry and Meghan now have a £150 million deal with Netflix and an £18 million deal with Spotify when they're doing their podcasts, etc. Do you know how hard it is to be successful to make a podcast or a YouTube channel? How much time and how much money it takes for an average schmuck like me to do that? And obviously they have got these kind of figures and this kind of interest and viewership because of who they are. So on the one hand, they want to step away and disconnect from the royal family, but on the other hand, they're using this huge advantage. And I just think that they have to recognise the privilege that they have. Now, there is an argument that he was born into his circumstances and he didn't choose this, but so what? Everybody's born into their circumstances. I've seen patients who are born into horrific circumstances, from poverty, drug abuse, homelessness. So, you know, he's got it pretty good. To be fair to him, I read that the couple spent 2.4 million of the public's money to refurbish their cottage, which is empty by the way. It's called Frogmore Cottage near Windsor Castle. To be fair, I heard that they've paid that back, so props to them for doing that. So let's think about the public opinion of their coming out on Oprah. So YouGov did a poll, and apparently my kind of opinions are fairly well shared in that 56% of people showed no sympathy toward them, 17% showed a fair amount of sympathy towards them, 12% showed a lot of sympathy towards the couple, and 15% said they didn't know. And to those 15%, I would say, what's wrong with you? Have an opinion. Okay, before we move on, I just want to introduce you to this channel, A Psych for Sore Minds. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I work in courts and in prisons and in secure psychiatric units. I assess and rehabilitate the mentally ill people who have committed crimes. I do a whole range of topics on this videos, from high-profile cases to interviewing ex-prisoners, ex-patients, to talking about specific diagnoses. There's something for everybody on this channel, and you should subscribe straight away. If not, I will come and find you and I'll beat you up. Okay, so let's get on to the juicier and the interesting bit from my perspective, which is Harry talking about his mental health issues. So I acknowledge that Harry has had a lot of difficulties in his life. I know I said before that he is hugely privileged, and that's true. I think both things are true, but he's gone through a lot of stuff. His entire life has been under a microscope. He did some pretty stupid things when he was a kid, which are public knowledge. I'm not going to go through them, but if you're interested, I'm sure you could research it. His mother died in very tragic circumstances, and it was very public at the time, and he was just a child. So I do feel for the guy. So I do think he does get to have a position of experience and privilege to talk about his mental health issues. I think that's fair enough. And I also think that it's good that he's actually making the effort to use his position. It could contribute to decreasing stigma overall, which is a good thing. So when I heard that he was going to speak out publicly, I was impressed. I think that we should all talk about mental health issues. That's part of the reason that I do this podcast. What I hoped was that he wouldn't make it sort of superficial or glossy. I hoped that he would deep dive into some serious issues, like a lack of funding in the NHS for mental health issues, like a lack of access for people, for the average person, to get mental health care. Now, I should say that I've not seen Harry and Meghan's new show. I don't have Apple TV, but I have read the reviews about it with interest. And unfortunately, the reviews say that it's a bit tame, it's a bit mild, so what I was worried about happening did happen. Harry talks a lot about coming out and speaking about mental health issues and how this is a brave thing to do and it takes strength and courage. And he's not wrong, but that's kind of an obvious message. I think we know that. I don't think the problem is that people, well, actually that's not fair. I think there are some people that need that extra step, but far bigger, greater an issue is the lack of access to mental health services. I'm not sure that he's necessarily going to inspire people to come out. So I think that people can't relate to Harry. If you come from a background of poverty and abuse, if you're financially struggling, then is seeing this multi-millionaire prince talk about some of his issues, is that going to inspire you to do the same? I'm not convinced. I could be wrong, and if you disagree with me, please let me know in the comments section. I just think that he's missed a huge opportunity. He's got this platform. He could have talked about the difficulties. He could have talked about access, how there's really, really long waiting lists to get therapy, sometimes for over a year. Unlike him, the average person can't afford private therapy. He could have talked about the fact that there's a backlog of cases with community mental health teams, especially because of what happened with the pandemic. It was harder to see people, a lot of ill people deteriorated over the last year or so. So in my line of work, when I work in courts, I see very, very frequently, so at least twice a month on average, I will see somebody who I think needs to be sectioned and go into psychiatric hospital, but we really struggle because there's just not enough beds available because of a lack of funding. Some of these people are remanded back to prison, sometimes for days or even like over a week, just because there's not a bed available. And I think that Harry could have maybe used his platform and his power and his position to try and address this, to try and challenge it, to try and change it. So my point is, what's the point in telling somebody who's really unwell, who's kind of damaged, who needs help and can't get it? What's the point of telling them that it's brave to talk about their mental health in the first place? To be fair to Harry, he has used his position in another way, which is getting celebrity friends such as Lady Gaga, DeMar DeRozan, who plays for the San Antonio Spurs, to talk about their mental health issues. So I think it's a good thing. I think that will contribute to more people at least being open to having the conversation about mental health, it being less of a taboo, reducing the stigma. So I do think it's a good thing, but is it enough, I guess, is what I'm asking. Okay, dear viewers, let's get back to that question I asked you before. So I'm not talking about how much money Harry has altogether, that's probably way more, but just how much he inherited from his mother. And the answer is, drumroll, £6.5 million, which I hear has been invested, which I imagine he had nothing to do with, and has been increased to £10 million. So the average salary in the UK is about 30 grand. That means it would take the average person 333 years to save up that kind of money if they didn't spend a penny. So in conclusion, I don't have anything against Prince Harry personally. I know he's had his problems, I know he's been in the public eye, I know he's probably been bullied and mistreated, him and Meghan, by the royal family. I suppose there's a counter argument to that, which is part of the deal is that you get all this privilege and you have all these doors open for you, and in return you've got to keep a certain public face and you don't really get to bitch about your circumstances. So he's kind of broken that code. But despite that, I accept that he's had a hard time with things. It's just that I don't feel sympathy for him because he's coming from this position of huge, colossal privilege, and I'm not sure that he's fully recognising that. And when it comes to Harry speaking about his mental health and making his show, I'm glad he's done it, I do. And I'm rather that the show existed than it didn't exist. However, I was just hoping for a bit more. And I should say that I fully acknowledge that I am on the front line. I'm quite cynical because of the things that I see, the patients that I see, the issues that I see, and the mental illnesses and diagnoses that I see. So I know that my view is skewed. Despite everything I've said, I'm going to keep looking at the situation with an open mind. So I'm going to watch his shows if and when I can. I'm going to read the reviews. I'm going to keep an open mind because he could surprise me. Things could get deeper. He could tackle things more efficiently. I don't know. So viewers, that's enough of me ranting. Hope you enjoyed this video. Really interested genuinely to know your own opinions. Please share your thoughts and your ideas and any questions in the comment sections below. If you want to email me directly, hit me up at psychforsoreminds@gmail.com. Please subscribe. If you don't, bad things will happen. All that remains for me to say is stay 𝐕𝐢𝐝𝐼𝐸ic, and please remember, I love you.